Okay, hi everybody. This is A7X Fan Ben with God Mason, and this is Pirate CSG Podcast episode number 9 for real. After I messed up the last intro, this is episode 9. So today we're going to go over a small handful of custom stuff, and then the focus of the episode is going to be on discussing the game being relaunched in like a mobile format as a mobile game. But we're going to start with a few customs. So we're going back to the custom ships organized version thread. And we're just going to do one custom per post randomly like we've been doing. So I'll start Captain Bendari. I'm going to pick something. I'm going to pick the first ship he's got in his post, INS Dawn Princess. He has a custom faction from that's called Sendora. I think it was inspired by something to do with his username, if I remember correctly. This one's a 4-master, 14 points, 3 cargo, SS move, good cannons, and it has the SAT, same action twice ability built in. So it's a very good ship, actually. The cargo is the only thing that's lacking a little bit, but I think the SAT and the guns and speed and the fair point cost really make up for it. And it might be, with the built-in SAT, I'd say, if anything, it might be slightly too good, but it's a good ship.
I agree with you. It looks to me sort of like HMS Titan Light.
Yeah.
Not as good firepower, not as good hold space, but cheaper and faster.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, though. It, if anything, could probably stand to be a point more expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's probably all I have to say about that ship.
Cool.
Should we do one from Selvaxaries now?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, you could start one from there.
All right, I'm going to have to figure one out. Mm-hmm. Somebody made a bunch of these that are like Legend of Zelda themed, and I'm not sure how much I like that mixing with fantasy pirate setting. But
yeah, it was interesting, I guess.
Yeah. I'll just do AES Melville, because that's just the one that's at the top of my page. Mm-hmm. It's a 4-masted icebreaker, not particularly well armed. Is that ability fitting at all? Wait, no. Wait, I misread it. Icebergs do not eliminate the ship's mass. Yeah, it's kind of strange. I don't see a point cost listed.
Yeah, he doesn't do point cost because he's not. He has a lot of different types of customs, so he doesn't usually try to make up cost.
Yeah, that's a good point. I look at it.
We can try. That's something we can do for his is try to cost it.
If I look at this, I think this is probably 10 points, maybe.
Yeah, I think it'd be more, personally.
It's not particularly good at anything.
Yeah, it's more durable and sort of faster than most of the icebreakers. So I think it would have to be as expensive as those, if not more, because as we saw from your top 10 icebreakers post, top icebreakers in general, there's not even 10. They're not really that great. That last ability, whenever this ship rams an iceberg, roll a d6 on a 6, take a random treasure from any wild island and load it onto the ship, which is very gimmicky and odd.
It has a low chance of succeeding.
Yeah, between that and then icebergs do not eliminate this ship's mast and the solid speed, I would say like 14 or 15 points, but it's still not a ship I would really go out of my way to use, but I think it's at least interesting as icebreakers go.
Yeah, it's easily the most unique one, but at that price, I think I wouldn't ever touch it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll move on to Xerex now. I'm going to go down the list a bit. I'm going to try to cover something we haven't talked about. I'll go with, let's see. I'll go with a crew. Philippe Tizak. It looks like a French crew, 8 points. The ability is Captaineer, which I'm pretty sure would be Captain plus Cannoneer. 2 keywords in one, unless it's Musketeer, but I think it's Cannoneer. And then it says this ship's crew cannot be eliminated unless she sinks. So that's usually like a 4 or 5 point ability, so you get a little discount here. So Captain, Cannoneer, and Crew Protect for 8 points, which is a pretty good deal. So a very good crew for any gunship, really, that could save a cargo space by combining abilities.
Mm-hmm. Or even a little bit of points if you wanted all 3 of those abilities. Mm-hmm. I think it's just unfocused enough that I might not actually use it myself. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going to make a boarding ship, you're kind of going to go all out, whereas this seems to be sort of a mix of... I mean, the crew protection is both valuable for gunships and boarders, but more valuable for boarders in case you lose a boarding party.
Yep, absolutely. And then the other thing, the crew can't build unless she sinks, but then with 3 abilities in one, you won't have as many crew to protect. So you'd really want to stack that ship with as many crew as possible to get more benefit from that ability.
That's true too, and because it's kind of an expensive crew, and the kinds of play styles it encourages, I think you'd only have space for 1 or 2 more good crew when you use this one.
Yeah, exactly.
So I feel like it's probably a good crew in the right situation, but most of the time you're going to be better off with just getting the other 2 abilities.
Yeah.
The 2 that you really need.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do one from El Cazador now if you want.
All right. I have a cracker in my mouth, so this will be a second.
Yeah. Yeah, El Cazador was the one that did the Hyrule faction, the one from Legends of Zelda. I think the pieces are cool. I'm kind of with you. The mixing of the worlds is not something I'm a huge fan of, but in terms of pure customs, he's done a good job with point costs and things like that. And a lot of the customs he's made are quite interesting, definitely.
Yeah, I haven't gone through them just because I feel so strongly about my mixed canons. I think everybody feels that way about even the Pirates of the Caribbean set.
Yeah. No, I like it for that, but I've already talked about that on here.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go with Caesar. Navigator was one of those from Savage Shores, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm remembering that right. Caesar is a 9-point expatriate navigator with a limit keyword. It's a free action. Mercenary ships may unload treasure at your home island if they're within S. Loses 1 point of value. I think that's actually a pretty good fix for the lack of, the inability for mercenaries to run gold. But it's still profoundly expensive, and there aren't really any good mercenary gold runners in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty good point. Yeah, it's an interesting crew. I think I want to say I used it once or twice in 2015, but I can't remember. I know I play tested the submarine. This one, it is interesting. It's a little bit complicated, but it's probably worth talking about the linked submarine because it's linked to the Gladius Day, which is a 15-point submarine, 3 segments, bad cannons, 4 cargo, L move, mercenary and submarine keywords, and then gets +2 her base move and +1 cargo spaces if she doesn't carry any crew. I remember, I think he made that edit because I think originally the ship was too good, if I remember correctly. It might have been really fast or something. So it's a trade-off. So this one is a good mercenary gold runner without crew, because then you have LS move with 5 spaces, but then it's linked to a crew that lets all the mercs in your fleet unload at your home island with an S. So it's like a trade-off. Yeah,
you can either use it as a gold runner or, well, I mean, you either can't or you can't, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It needs to be edited, I think, so that its ability isn't negated by having its own linked crew aboard.
I think you're almost better off using the Gladius Day as the gold runner and then putting Caesar on like a gunship or even a Time Master in a bigger game or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. That makes a lot more sense.
Okay, so now... Oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
Whose post is next?
Oh, yours, it looks like, because I'm getting
I'll
to the end of the first page.
One that excites you.
Yes.
One that doesn't have the ironclad keyword in it somewhere, probably. See anything you like?
Yeah, I'm kind of going randomly. I'm going to look at USS Sawmill, American ship. It's Switchblade, 4 masts, of course. Really fast SSS move, 3 cargo spaces, 17 points. Along with Switchblade keyword, it has when the ship wins a boarding party, eliminate a mast from the enemy ship. I would say it's about right point-wise, because it's really fast, but the cargo space and guns are about average, or cargo space even a little below for a Switchblade, but then the ability is really great and pairs really well with the Switchblade keyword. I would probably want a +1 to boarding crew, and then just start hacking at everybody, basically.
Yeah, I tried to make it sort of a thematic type of thing, make it what you'd expect from a Switchblade that we never quite got. I always felt the Switchblades were a bit expensive.
Yep.
I think at one point it might have been cheaper, and it might have had like an LL move or something like that instead. But yeah, as is, I guess I can't really critique my own stuff.
Okay. With that, we're gonna move to Xerx's Return of Davy Jones set, which we've been working on and off. So we're on the Spanish faction now, which is the third faction in the spreadsheet. And then we're pretty much going to go through all the stuff in the Spanish faction. So I'll start it off with the Muerte de la Diablo. 23 points for a 5-master, 4 cargo L move. Very good cannons, the Blockade Runner keyword, and +1 to her cannon rolls against the Cursed. And I'm actually
Why are there faction abilities in a custom set?
Oh, okay. And then I see the Blockade Runner keyword I found it in the first page of the spreadsheet, actually. I changed the page. The ship gets +1 to her ram and boarding rolls, so that's a very good ability. This one, to me, I know he and his brothers like ramming and boarding a lot, especially one of his brothers. They might have even made this custom, I'm not totally sure. To me, it's slightly expensive to use as a pure gunship. I'm not into boarding and ramming quite as much. I could see the cost coming down, actually, maybe 20 or 21. And yeah, the +1 to cannon rolls against the Cursed is kind of just a 1-point thing at the end there that isn't a huge deal. It's a good gunship, but too expensive to use in anything less than like 60 points, in my opinion.
I mean, obviously powerful, but I think, as you said, it's too expensive. I'd almost be comfortable knocking it down to 19 points.
Yeah, I could do that too, especially if it was just +1 to boards and not rams as well. But
plus, I mean, that ability is not particularly useful on a ship that only has an L move.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be hard to catch stuff.
I'll start on Mano de Dios, 14 points, 3 masts, average cargo and move. Pretty good armament. It looks like it's a Scorpion. It's a Spanish Scorpion. Interesting. This is not actually that bad because it has a World Hater ability, which makes the fact that it does have kind of cargo and movement viable because it does have top-tier firepower.
Yeah, it is pretty good for a Scorpion. Maybe it would be the best Scorpion if it was released, I would say. Just about.
It probably would.
Yeah, especially with the crew available, too.
Joaquin Vega, Cargo Master type things.
Yeah, that's quite a good ship. Next one, La Corona, 10 points. It's a flotilla. It has a cargo space, actually, which is interesting. The guns are pretty good.
It's 10 points.
Yeah. The flotilla and extended range are the keywords, of course, as with the other flotillas. And then the special ability, this flotilla may use equipment, but may not have crew assigned to her. So I would say that's pretty interesting. I would be willing to use that for 10 points. I know it's pricey, but I think it has a lot of potential. In this case, I would want to put on like exploding shot maybe. One thing that would be interesting is exploding shot and the other equipments when they backfire. A bunch of them eliminate a mast, but then this one, flotillas don't technically have masts. They just have the flags. So I guess you could probably, in kind of a rules question, you could probably get away with stuff backfiring and then not having to eliminate a mast. Like you'd still have to remove the equipment from the game, but in this case, I think you'd be able to avoid losing the flag from that, which is nice because I've had a lot of equipment backfire in my campaign games.
Hey Wolf, we have a question.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, custom question. It's a good one. But I think it's a good flotilla though. I would use it definitely.
I think it's a good idea, but it's obviously, as you said, a bit pricey. And then there's also the fact that I think the inability to put crew aboard and the ability to throw on a piece of equipment is not particularly good. Mm-hmm. While it does let you choose what the ability you throw on it is, I don't think the flexibility is worth the extra cost.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
El Acorazado Nuevo. This is 24 points, good cargo, the move. Interesting. It's smaller than El Acorazado. It's basically got the same defensive ability as El Acorazado, but also you can't shoot it with L-range guns. I think that it's just another case of too many defensive abilities are making it too profoundly expensive and kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say it's not viable, but probably a little bit OP. It's just kind of too extreme to balance well, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that pretty much 100%. I think I even said that when I post on the forum, if I remember. Okay, The next one, La Muerta Rápida. 20 points, 4 masts, 5 cargo, SS move, very good cannons, and new keyword steamship, which I'm not a huge fan of seeing, but it says this ship gets plus Eldor printed base move, but helmsman may not be assigned to the ship. So in this case, this thing basically has a max base move of SSL, and then the other ability says the ship's crew cannot be eliminated unless she sinks. It's definitely kind of too good. I've seen this one a bunch. He's used this in most or all of his campaign games that he's posted battle reports for. I know it's done well in those games, and I would say, I think it's a little too good. I think maybe the cargo could come down to 4 or make the cannons a little worse.
With the base move lower.
Yeah, probably that too. Maybe just L. Yeah, something moving SSL without. You don't even have to put any crew aboard, like it's just built into the keyword, and then a very good second ability with amazing guns. I think it's too good. So I think, some edits probably would be best.
Yeah, I think if anything, the fact that you've seen it so many times kind of lends credence to it as being a little OP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he tends to make OP customs, which he likes to do in the game, so that's understandable.
Yeah, OP customs are fun, but of course, I mean, I was going to say WizKids would never do something like that. La Fuega, which I think, is that fire?
I think so, yeah.
How does that translate? Somebody can tell us. It's 14 points. It's a 4-masted ship. Armament's not quite as good, nor is cargo space. Battleship, what's that mean again?
It gets 2 shots per mast, like longship, and has extended range.
That's way too powerful. That is... Oh, and it gets a boarding roll bonus. This is probably like a 25-point ship, honestly.
Yeah.
It's too crazy. I think that keyword is entirely too powerful.
Yeah, I think it was unnecessary. I tried to do something similar with the ship of the line keyword, but then I backtracked on that when I'm editing my custom set. But yeah, I think maybe 22 points, but I think battleship should lose extended range at least. I mean, you compare it to like a 3-masted longship, like we were just ranking, which has 6 total shots at no more than L range. This one gets 8 at SS
range. Yeah,
with better speed than most of the longships at a lower cost. So yeah,
and with a better crew selection because it's part of a better faction.
Yeah, it just doesn't work, honestly. But yeah, more than 20 points or major edits, to be honest. Next one, La Asesina. 12 points, 3 masts, 3 cargo, L move, average cannons. It's pretty much average in every way, but then it has ironclad keyword.
You don't like that?
Yeah, I don't like it. Basically, his ironclad keyword says you must roll a 5 or 6 to hit this ship. So very good defensive ability. And then it also has the cargo wrecking ability. So yeah, this one's way too good for the point cost as well. So I would say maybe 19 points instead of 12, something like that.
I'm not totally sure about 19, but higher is definitely necessary. Yeah. I agree with you there.
Yeah.
16 maybe?
Yeah, at least, yeah.
Yeah, 16, maybe 17.
Mm-hmm.
It's the kind of thing that probably have to be play tested there to evaluate how effective it is against other ships at that cost.
Mm-hmm.
El Dorado, 19 points, pretty small but huge cargo space. It's the TARDIS in ship form. 2S move, crap armament, and it's a hoist. It's got a secret hold. I'm not sure how I feel about this thing. It strikes me as kind of a more expensive Buscador,
Yes.
but not all that much better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of similar to the Rocinante from Return to Savage Shores and the Frontier, sort of. I'd say it's it kind of strikes me as like an average hoist because it has like the right like cargo cost move and secret hold keyword that hoists that we're accustomed to seeing from hoists. I think it's actually maybe a little bit more in line with what hoists should have costed. I think they're a little too cheap for what they can do. So I think it's great. I think the cost is right pretty much for what it's capable of. It's a little bit predictable, I guess. I think the Spanish, they got 2 hoists in the last 2 sets, essentially. I mean, one's on release, but still, we know about it now because of Wolf. So I don't really think Spain needed another hoist, and this one is really similar to the other hoist. So it's a little boring or predictable, I guess. But
I agree with you there. It's nothing inspired.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're into the crew. Almirante Sebastian de Alba, 7 points, helmsman, and then instead of giving the ship an action, give another ship in your fleet 2 actions. So basically like the Micron ability for 5 points instead of 6, because it's 7 points total with helmsman built in. Should be 8 at least. I mean, the Micron ability was underpriced to begin with, but I guess it's a little bit interesting because you could put it on a gunship and then use helmsman, but then if you want to give away your action, you have to give up that speed bonus for that turn. So it's all right. Just a little too cheap.
Yep. I mean, as you said, it's far too cheap considering the strength of that ability. I honestly, with a fixed point cost, could see this being 9 or 10 points.
Yeah.
Maybe more. Who knows?
Yeah.
I'll skip on to Inquisitor Rosa de la Cruz, 6 points, linked to all Spanish ships, fear, and it's a crew killer on cannon hits. Yeah, that's kind of my reaction too.
Yeah.
It's a couple of not particularly exciting abilities. They're not bad, and sure, it's good that it's linked to all Spanish ships, but I'm not really sure that there are any strategies that this would be the ideal crew to use.
Yeah, it'd be okay on like a short range brawler, like a 4 or 5 mast with like a lot of S range guns, because then you'd be in range with fear. I guess I don't know. It's okay. He essentially has fear at 4 points because the crew killing ability is 2. Fear to me is worth 2 points because it's very unreliable, and getting a roll of 6 to shorten the other ship's base move to S really isn't that great. I root for 5s when I roll for fear because canceling is much better than the speed decrease. So fear to me is 2 points in terms of how valuable it is to me. So I could see this guy at 4 or maybe 5 with the link, but yeah, I wish it was a little cheaper. I would use him at 4 or 5, but at 6, there's some other people I'd usually rather use in most cases. The next one, Captain Rogelio de Silva, 5 points, linked to Alacorazada Nuevo, which we went over. Loyal Spain, and then Captaineer, which I'm just going to go make sure in the keywords. Yeah, it's Captain plus Cannoneer, not Musketeer, just like I thought, so I was right about that at least. So this one, 5 points is right. So basically just get the 2 generic crew abilities in 1 cargo space, which is nice. So.
I always liked that, but I do prefer the Captain Helmsman combos over this.
Yeah.
I do see the purpose for this one, but at the same time, I'd almost rather use, what was it, Louis Swan from Rise of the Fiends plus a Helmsman. It would take up an extra cargo space, but it would save another point.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yep.
But it's still viable at the point cost that it's at.
Yeah.
On Angelica Bianco, it's a 4-point cargo master. I think cargo masters were way too cheap.
Yeah.
To start with, so 4 points plus it's linked to something.
Yeah, and plus it's linked to the hoist, which already has 7 cargo. So this is another example of Master Bianco is also a cargo master. I feel like, I don't know if this is like his sister or something, like flavor text wise.
Daughter, maybe?
Yeah, I think I think she should have a more unique ability to separate her from the other Bianco. And even if he keeps it at Cargo Master, at least 5 to keep it in line with what WizKids said. And yeah, it should be 7 or more if it was priced right from the beginning. But
I am a fan of like those faction exclusive reduced cost items, but this is one that I don't think should be reduced.
Yeah. So this whole combo with the Dorado and Bianco is like almost the same as either of their 2 hoists, and then Savage Shore is Bianco. So I think it could be differentiated from those would be best. And then
last I knew, not to interrupt, but Savage Shore's Bianco basically has the secret hold and Cargo Master abilities. Yeah. And isn't he linked to Buscador?
I can't remember. I think he's just linked to the Haulers because they got another version of that set too.
Yeah. Either way, it's kind of the same thing as Buscador and Master Bianco from that set.
Yeah, exactly. I think it should be different. Next one, last crew, Comandante Roberto Erna. 3 points linked to the Morta del Diablo, the 5 master that was the first ship we went over here. Crew of any nationality may use their abilities on this ship, which is a 3-point ability, so that's cool. Pretty basic. What I will say is the Spanish didn't get one of these, I'm pretty sure, in all the sets. So seeing them get one here is kind of a long time coming, I guess. So I'm not really opposed to it.
Yeah. I mean, it is an ability they could use. You know how I indexed the exclusive abilities by faction. And it is actually quite important to be able to accept abilities from any faction, because some have really good abilities that you do want, but you can't get without an international crew like this.
You're right.
That's all we've got from the Spain section of Return of Davy Jones.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so next we're going to move on to the last part of this episode, which is discussing restarting or relaunching the game in like a mobile format. You've thought about this more than I do, so I'll let you start it off, and I'll kind of respond and try to formulate my own thoughts as we go along.
All right, so one of the things that I think ended up getting the game canned was, I mean, aside from the fact that you pointed out that not everybody responded well to the fantasy elements being introduced, aside from the downturn in the economy around the time that the game was scrapped, I think one of the things that kept it from being profitable was obviously the fact that they've got to make all these cards. They've got to print them.
Yep.
So I think a mobile game would these days reach more people than a print game would. It could even be a free-to-play game. I mean, a sort of thing where you could buy packs with just a little bit of money, as opposed to $4. You could make it 1 or 2, or you could even gradually earn gold by winning games and buy them with
I like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it would need relatively little modification from the game that was printed, although I would want to rebalance the hell out of everything.
Yeah.
Problems that I had with distribution in pack form, one of them is every single pack contained, the standard variation of 2 ships, 1 generic crew, and sometimes you'd get something like crew event or fort or something else on the side. I think the fact that you only got 1 generic crew per pack was pretty crippling to new players. It's not a problem for you or I or for a lot of the people in miniature trading, but it probably did make it so that people entering, say, tournaments, it was almost predetermined who would win those games, I'm guessing, based on really the size of somebody's collection.
Yeah, especially with like sealed pack games too.
Yeah, that too. And there's also the fact that kids can't really afford all that many packs. I certainly wouldn't have been competitive in a tournament.
No, me either.
An adult that has that gets a couple grand every month and can spend a couple $100 each time a new expansion comes out.
Yeah,
adults would have stomped the kids.
Exactly.
So, whereas a kid who's got way too much time and can actually afford to grind out packs for themselves versus an adult who can buy the packs for themselves. Relatively even ground there.
Yeah, I agree completely. And yeah, going back to the generic crew, I've thought about restarting it like in a physical form. And if I did that, I've thought about not even just 2 generic crew in a card, but 4, and then just have like a miniature master keyword
or even 9
list.
maybe.
Yeah, and just have like a miniature master keyword list that has the keywords on it, like in the pack, so you don't have to look them up. And then like 4 to a card or more, if anything. But the mobile game, I like that playing for gold, that you can use the gold to buy new stuff with. I think that's a good idea too. And if you were struggling, you could try to find like other people who didn't have a big collection online
Trade.
and try to play against them. Yeah, exactly. I was going to bring that up. Yeah, trade, just like on Administrative Trading. It'll be super easy. You don't have to send anything in the mail. No physical stuff. You just agree to a trade, and then you can not have to buy as many packs potentially if you get what you want or need at the time. So I think there would have to be some rebalancing in terms of costs. I think it would be not so much a ban list, maybe just ban events. I've already talked about.
I'd probably remove events. Honestly, they're so unpopular.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. You could just eliminate them from pack pulls basically. But I think I think what they could do is there's a few things that could be edited ability wise, like Jonah, to either scrap that or totally redo it, but other things like Banshee's Cry that are easy to understand, just change the point cost to 10 or something. Just do a quick fix would probably be all that's needed to make it pretty balanced, and then you wouldn't have people complaining that their opponent pulled a Sand Cristobal and you got 2 Laos or something.
Yeah. I mean, Banshee's Cry would pretty much be fair at 6 or 7 points.
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that one could be fixed, but a lot of the game ships would need a lot of rethinking. As you said, San Cristobal would not escape unscathed. I mean, we could talk forever about how it would be balanced this way if we were to start it. But I'll continue with some of my gripes on how packs were done. I mean, the physical format, when you got a unique crew, it's basically the same as a generic crew in that it comes in a card and you punch the tile out. I think that was a waste of styrene and thus is a waste of money. I think they should have printed them on just plain trading card stock, where the back would be, say, a faction flag and maybe some trim showing what set it's from, red for Crimson Coast, the like. And then once you flip it over, it's the portrait, the cost, and the ability text.
Yeah, I could see that.
That would have made it a bit, actually a lot easier to store. It would have lowered the cost of packs, made the game probably more profitable as a whole, I want to say.
Yeah.
But at the same time, splitting production between styrene cards and trading cards may have, I don't know, it might have saved money. It might have cost a little bit extra. I think the advantages are there, that it makes sense to do it the way I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. And you could still do a thing. Well, it'd be hard to have face down crew, but you could still do a thing maybe where you have one crew on the top of the card, one on the bottom, or something like that, and you could cut them in half, or have just have a front and back to the card with 2 crew on it, stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't like those 2-sided ones because they're such a pain to store.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a few really good ones out there where both crew are really good, where I almost want to have 2 copies of it so I can insert. What was it? There's one from Frozen North that's got a really good English crew on one side and one pirate or something on the other. Who knows?
Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah.
When you've got 2 really good crew abilities, it's annoying because you can't figure out where to store it.
Yeah. In my binder, I usually just put the one I figure I'll use more for that faction, and I'll try to remember the other one. But
I typically go that route myself.
Yeah.
Although I should probably figure out which ones fall into that category and get a second copy just so I can.
Yeah.
But as far as pack contents go, how I'd have ideally changed it while it's in print or online. In print, I would have made it, the standard 2 ships, maybe 1 generic crew in card form, and then, not 1 generic crew, 1 named crew in card form, And then from there, the whole generic crew is kind of hard to answer. Maybe it's good to do a starter pack type thing. Maybe it's good to do like 4 or 9 or whatever per card. But I think the whole generic crew and the gold thing is kind of hard to solve.
Yeah.
But if I were to do online in an app form, I think I would do 3 ships per pack, just because that would make people more excited. It's like, oh, this one I got is not very good. I wonder if the other one's going to be better. Yeah. People go, oh, the one I got isn't very good. The other 2 could be better.
Yeah, that's a good idea too.
It might almost be a good idea. Or what about 2 ships and either a 3rd ship or a named crew?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And from the start, people would have access to the full roster of generic crew. Instead, I'm not sure if there'd be faction exclusive crew like navigators or cargo masters. That'd be something I'd answer later.
Yeah.
But from there, I did want to talk about how ship stats work and how I think there's some shortcomings with having the game in the print format it was. One of the big limitations that I think is there in the game as it was printed was the 6-sided die.
Yeah.
The tiny little one. If I were to change it into a sort of online app form, one of the biggest changes I would make is all die rolls wouldn't be 1 to 6. It would be a 20-sided die. Because that would give you a much broader range of attributes you can apply to ships.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you want to give a ship kind of average, middling firepower, you have to do a 3S gun. 4L isn't quite as good. 3L's a little too good.
Yep.
So you could keep things approximately the same, but you could tweak it. Say you could make the most accurate ships in the game, you'd make it a 6 or 7 rank gun. Whereas you could, if you wanted something to be almost as good, you could make it 1 or 2 ranks worse, and it would suffer a little bit, but not a lot.
Yep.
I think it would add more to the sort of statistics side of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'd be interesting. I've never played a game with like a lot of sides to the die. Mostly just played Pirates, of course, but I think it's definitely an interesting point. And then you could have more variation on some of the die roll abilities too, like SAT could maybe be more or less effective than EA, like extra action and stuff like that. And
if you felt the odds were unfair, you could manipulate them, or you could even have differing odds between factions if you wanted.
Yeah, and then like the ability that says on a 6 you can give any ship in your fleet an extra action. You could have like maybe 18 to 20 instead of just 1, and then you could make more abilities based on it, because then you could do you could have one that says if you get a 20, but only a 20, you could have 2 extra actions in your fleet or something like that. So, and then that would change boarding rolls a lot too.
Yeah, it would change boarding rolls. I do want to get onto that later because I think that's an interesting mechanic to completely rebuild. Another one I wanted to touch on was move speed. It was limited to, modular combinations of S plus L in the print game, whereas in an online game, you could simply include a knots speed, which means you could have further variation and fine tweaks of how fast you want a ship to go.
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting. I wouldn't be opposed to that too, and it'd be more like historically based too. It'd sound cooler than like a short length, which is kind of random. So
yeah, and at the same time, cannons could be given specific ranges instead of its S or its L.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point too. I think another thing a lot of people added to the game in house rules, even from the very first set, was like wind rules. I don't think we would need that for a mobile game, but I think maybe there could be kind of like different play styles. Like maybe there's like an unlimited play style where it's the original game and all the point costs are the same or whatever, like Banshee's Stride is still like wicked good. Then there's like an edited game, and then maybe there's like, maybe it's different like rooms in a mobile game. Like you can go into a room almost like on Vassal, and those are the players who want to play with like wind rules, and then that's like built into the app. I don't know, that may be too hard, or maybe just keeping one version would be better, but trying to accommodate some of the players' wishes would be interesting too. from like a historical standpoint. I don't know if it would make it too complicated, but I think it'd be interesting to do a poll on it at least.
I think as a whole, it would probably be better to just change it up and modify everything. The fans of the original game would figure out the changes that were made and be able to adapt to it. And honestly, WizKids did make enough mistakes with balance that, speaking of balance, if there was something that was launched or if there was a tweak that was made that didn't work out, instead of having to go, oops, you could launch a patch and fix it. Then I think that's one of the most important things that WizKids never did, like release some sort of statement saying, we're officially retconning Banshee's Cry to 7 points.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to bring the documentation with you every time you went to a game and somebody goes, oh, but Banshee's Cry is 3 points.
Yeah. Yeah, they'd ask for like proof, or they'd say they haven't bought sets since RV came out.
Yeah.
That'd be easier in a mobile game too, because then like if they made a new version of the game that you have to get the update, then you can't use it at 3 points. It would cost 7 points, and you'd have like a calculator for your build total. You can't like cheat on that. So.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, the increased range of stats, just sort of 1 to 20, or using knots or maybe meters or what have you, yards might be a better thing to do for gun range. I think that would give, not only the increased range of accuracy values, but a more precise gun range thing would allow factions to be differentiated between further. Because as is, you look at the factions, you go, okay, pirates are clearly the best just because they have the best abilities and some of the best ships. The French are bordering on pointless because they basically got nothing really awesome. And the Cursed are a joke, and they should have never been implemented.
Yeah, they're very gimmicky.
As much as I like the Cursed, they strike me as something that was originally supposed to be a one-off action, like the Vikings, like the Jade Rebellion, but then they kind of needed something to fill a gap, so they just kind of stuck with it. If I were to do anything, I might actually drop a lot of the existing pirate ships, not like from the game, but all the one-off factions I would just make into pirate factions.
Yeah.
And completely scrap the curse. Let the pirates just be their own ethereal sort of, bad guy, weird strategy type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that.
Maybe even appropriate some of the faction ships to the English or French.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Corsairs and the Vikings especially could pretty easily fit into the pirate faction. Mercenaries could maybe the mercenaries.
Mercenaries.
Yeah,
mercenaries could be their own thing.
Yeah, exactly. But I think they would have to rework the expatriate and mercenary keyword, because that's
absolutely
a ton of headaches. And then the Jade Rebellion is a wild card. They could probably stay as their own faction, and then if they did a mobile game, they could start with what's out there, and then as they release new sets, they could do new Dutch, or that's what I was gonna say, new Jade stuff to make them more viable. And then like I just spoiled, the Dutch are the faction that people wanted all the time back in the day, so that would be pretty much the most obvious faction to add if they did like a bunch of sets.
Why the Dutch though?
They were so dominant in the 17th century. It's based on history mostly, so.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I think I've heard people say they even wanted Russian or whatever at some point.
Yeah, that could make sense. Portuguese, like 1500s, that would be like an Age of Exploration set would probably have to have the Portuguese.
Or Sweden.
Yeah. Yeah, Sweden was good too. Yep.
Yeah. I do think that you could probably start to add other stuff, but it would probably be best if this hypothetical app game were to come into existence, the first 3 sets would come with it, I'd say. Spanish Main through Revolution, all tweaked to fit the game better. And then gradually, people would get the new sets released to them, and they'd go, oh, cool. Because, they can come back every couple months and go, oh, cool, Barbary Coast is out, and now South China Seas. And then the whole fantasy element thing, I would keep personally, but I think it does need to be reworked. Although I'm also not totally sure how I feel about re-adding the poke ships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the fantasy stuff could be kind of reworked a bit to make it a little bit better, but also maybe a little bit rarer or slightly less emphasized. And you actually made a point a second ago that I was just thinking in my head with releasing sets for the mobile game in a sequence rather than all at once, because it would be a lot to put all 13 sets into the game for like the developers. So maybe start with Spanish Main or the first three, and then like once every 2 months come out with a new set, because from the polls and surveys I've done, there's definitely a nostalgic aspect to this, where people like us, there's a lot of people out there that played the game as a kid, and then once they got older, they got like spending money, and then they got back into it like a decade later. So I think playing on the nostalgia and releasing like a new set, like new quote unquote, even though it's 10 years old or more, and having that feeling back, like, ooh, SCS comes out in a month, like I can't wait to try to get the Grand Path again and stuff like that. So I think that would definitely be an interesting play. And going back to the survey results, 70% of 84 responses said they'd be willing to play Pirates in a digital or online format, and then 58% said they'd be willing to play Pirates on a mobile device such as a smartphone, so more than 50%. And it was actually more like 60, because a few people said like they said yes in the other comment, but like they like emphasized it, like they would really want to. So it's basically like 60% of the responders would be willing to play it on a mobile device, which is a good sign. So.
And because of the turn-based nature of the game, you wouldn't have to dedicate hours from your day to set up and play the game. You could do it when it's convenient to you. Get on, say if somebody takes the bus to work, they get on the bus, pull out their phone, take their turn, and maybe you could even have multiple games running at once. Take their turn, hop over to the other game, take their turn, and then get off the bus for work.
Yeah, that's great.
And then on their lunch shift, they come back and play another turn.
Yeah, that reminds me of Vassal, where you can save the file and then just send it on. But here it'd be even easier, because you wouldn't have to like re-download the file. You would just hop on the app and just keep going from there. Yeah, I think that'd be great. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about Vassal, actually, is that you can play campaign games and whatnot without having like the physical pressures of like ending the game and like setting it up and stuff like that. So it makes it a lot easier. And playing remotely is just so huge. That's like the best thing about Vassal. Arguably, it's just amazing. So I think that would be one of the biggest things I would love in a mobile game, is just being able to play anybody anywhere. Because then people can't use the excuse of I don't have anyone to play with. Like everybody says that, or a ton of people do. But between Vassal and a potential mobile game, that would be erased. So there would be a lot more playing, and not necessarily less collecting, but people could really get invested in the game as it is, as a game, rather than just a collectible game, which I think is good.
I've also had some other thoughts regarding changes that could be made. Say point costs for games. You could choose, of course, the point cost that you're going to play. You could, build your fleet and then say, find me a game at this cost. An interesting thing that would have to be considered is ZLR plus 5 units.
Yeah.
Would you remove them?
I would, just because of pulling from packs. If you don't get one, then you have to negotiate with the other person. Do we use one? Do we not? And then they say, "Oh, I thought we were using them," and it's like, "Oh, I don't have one." I would have to take them out, to be honest.
I think I have to agree with you, although I would keep the limit and ransom keywords for a potential application elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that would be kind of interesting too. I think ransom could have appeared on more stuff, if anything. I think it
was underused. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had one game. It was 2 games ago, now quite a while, probably more than a month, but I ended up capturing somebody's plus 5, but they killed the crew when they realized I took it and was going to try to win the gold game with it. Wow. So, I mean, that led to an interesting dynamic. So there's definitely value in having the keywords there, but the ability on those crews is just probably too powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just unbalanced in terms of like pack pulls, definitely. And people it'd be the type of thing where a bunch of sets would be up, but everybody would be buying Crimson Coast until they got a +5, and then
Exactly.
it'd be kind of like a thing. It reminds me of like Banshee's Cry or like Becalmed, like back in like tournament play. Like if you don't use them, you're at a disadvantage, which is just kind of annoying, especially for a collectible game. So.
Yeah, as I said, don't have experience with any kind of play back while the game was in print. But I think we can probably agree that the nature of how limited access to the good stuff was probably not good for the game's popularity as a whole.
Yeah, there's a lot of great commons, but I mean, with 1,000 ships to pull, when there's 5 or 10 that are that good and overpowered.
San Cristobal and
Banshee's Cry,
Darkhawk 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Plus
Grand Temple even.
Yeah, even HMS Grand Temple with how good all those are as printed, you're kind of better just going after those ships and not bothering with some of the more interesting sets out there. Because as good as a ship like Tiger's Eye or Virtuous Wind are, you don't want them when you can have San Cristobal.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah, definitely.
So with, obviously an online implementation nerfing all the game's most broken ships, it would probably change the meta in a way that we'd have to relearn what's too powerful.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that would put the experienced players on about the same playing field as new players.
Yeah.
Because people like us would jump in and go, okay, I'm going to pull Rise of the Fiends until I get San Cristobal. And then we get San Cristobal and we go, wait a minute, this isn't the same.
Yeah. That'd be funny.
And then we've got a ship that really probably is balanced. But we've got to compete with having probably not assembled as good a fleet as somebody else. Then they've chosen some stuff that's been balanced properly, and now they've got a really interesting strategy. Maybe they're using a fixed version of Tiger or Le Duc de Bourgogne or all those other ships.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that comes without the whole thing of being open to adding custom units.
Oh yeah, that'd be interesting. Have like a custom. That would be really cool. Like create a ship and crew, and then you could have your opponent look it over before the game starts to see if they want to play against it or not.
Yeah.
That'd be cool too. Yeah. One thing find. No, you go ahead first.
Even better, instead of just following the release schedule of, okay, Barbary Coast just came out, so South China Seas is next. Throw people off, and maybe every 3 or 4 sets, release a new set of custom ships.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Yeah, because, I like that. Or even like a timeline type thing, like maybe throw in an extra historical set before you get to Davy Jones' Curse or something like that, to follow like a little slightly more of a timeline than they had.
Yeah, maybe even move things between sets.
Maybe.
Yeah.
One other thing I find interesting, one of the only negatives I can think of is, especially playing on a smartphone, the screen is kind of small. And you think about an Ocean, especially for a larger game or a multiplayer game, I'm not sure how that would work with zooming and playing like on a smaller screen, even than a computer. So you could, I'm not sure what you think of that or how big of a hindrance it would be, especially for like some of the older players or some of the people who got into it at the beginning when they were already like adults and stuff.
That is a good point. I do think there's a way to get around that because today's phones are just getting much more detailed screens than they were 5 years ago or a decade.
Yep.
Yeah, some people might need reading glasses to play it, but I do think that the whole, touch and drag, tap, and, even pinch controls to zoom in and out, I think those would still lend themselves pretty well to it. I mean, I'm kind of basing some of this off of my limited experience playing the online game before it was shut down.
Nice.
I think I played maybe some beta sessions or demo or whatever it was, but it was sort of fun, except the problem was they made packs cost just as much as they would in real life. They wanted $4 a pack. And me at age 12, I'm going to say I was, if I could spend $4 on a digital ship or a real ship, what do you think I'm going to go for?
Yeah, the real is cooler.
Yeah. So it just wasn't cost effective. And I think that's probably part of why the online game never thrived.
Yeah.
It also had some UI issues. It was kind of hard to figure out how to build a fleet. They didn't give you anything more than like this starter pack that everybody got that was full of not particularly good ships. I think it was like some under average Form Master, Sea Monster, and maybe some other good stuff.
Yeah. I wish I'd played that when it was around. But you brought up another point, though. I think part of the reason almost a third of the respondents in the survey said they wouldn't play on a smartphone. From some of the other answers, I gathered that a lot of people do prefer the physical game, and a lot of people love like the romance of using the actual physical ships, and a lot of people love building the ships. I think it kind of goes both ways, though. I think some of those players would adapt, and if it was released as a mobile-only game, I think they would get around to it eventually, and some of them would probably change their minds and get on the app or whatever. But I think there's positives that come with it too of not having it physical, because in my experience of teaching new players, building the ships and breakages are maybe the biggest issue, other than some of the rules stuff. So I think not having to build the ships, it does take the CSG, the constructible aspect, out of it. But I think that's okay, because it's actually one of the biggest complaints in the survey too, is like the fragility of the ships, which I don't have a problem now because I've built so many, but it does make sense for new players. So if it was mobile, they wouldn't have to build anything. So you would eliminate that complaint, even if you lost some of the like the established players who would prefer the physical game.
And there's also the difficulty with storing large collections.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've had that a little bit. I mean, I have enough room, but it's getting there.
Yeah, because they're fragile and there's so much of it that you need it organized. Storage does become a really strange problem for a lot of people, really. Some people will use a tackle box to solve their problems. I mean, my personal recommendation, anybody who is listening and has storage problems, within a couple months, check Target's plastic sort of organizer divider stuff, because I was able to get a bunch of these ornament storage boxes they were $8 each, and you can basically fit your entire faction collection, or even two of them for smaller collections, into one of these boxes. Yeah, they're really good. I've posted pictures of them a couple times, but I mean, beyond that, the whole collecting thing in app format, I'm not totally sure how trading would work. Maybe it would be better if people couldn't get duplicates, and instead they could, by brute force of just buying packs from the same set, get themselves a complete pack set.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. Like, it would know what you've already got from your, profile, your collection, and then you wouldn't get duplicates. I like that idea. I think trading would still happen based on factional preferences. One, like, I mean, there's some people who only play American, so they get a pack of French and Spanish. Even if those are good ships, they might trade them away for like average American ships or crew or whatever.
You're right.
And then that, and also like getting the last piece you need for a fleet. You might trade, like if you're building like a competitive 40-point fleet, you might trade away something that doesn't fit, that's too expensive, to get like a cheap gold runner that gets you that build that you need, and then you can play your fleet as you want to. So something like that. So I think trading, I think the no duplicates thing, I think that's a great idea to optimize it, and then I think trades would just happen, maybe not super often, but I think it'd still be a thing you could do if you wanted.
People could post up, put something into an automated system that goes, I want to trade this and I want to get this.
Like haves and wants, but like specifically.
Yeah, sort of like a miniature trading system, like allow people to say, I have this, but I'm willing to trade it. And then, mark the things that they want. And as a result, I suppose things of different rarity could be an interesting thing. maybe disallow trading across rarities. I don't think that's fair on, say, players who probably end up with a lot of common ships and wanted one particular super rare.
Yeah.
But of course, that would add complexity to the system.
Yeah, and then I think to solve like instead of doing mega packs, you could just make the special editions or limited editions like more rare. Like maybe an LE from Rise of the Fiends would be like 1 in every 50 packs or something, versus a super rare would be like 1 in 25, or just make odds or whatever. I don't think it would be too hard.
Yeah, or even some of the say. Well, yeah, I did want to talk about how promos, LEs, and SEs would be distributed.
Yeah.
I guess let's start with Rise of the Fiends, since you mentioned it. That was always a problem because for people who don't know, I'm sure most people do, the sort of promotional stuff, or LEs, for Rise of the Fiends were never distributed from tournaments. They were never distributed in packs or contests. The only way to get them was to get a factory set.
Yeah.
And and that means that all those variations on the ships and crew from that set, some of them are pretty powerful, like Griffin.
Yep.
Are close to unavailable these days.
Yeah. I think it's like $20 on eBay, and you can't really find it for less unless you get a lucky trade.
Yeah, I mean, if I ever see a real full factory set on Rise of the Fiends, I might have to splurge to get all that stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, the distribution of that, I think, as you said, sort of, would you say like 1 in 50 chance or something of getting it as part of the pack or in addition to?
I think getting it as like part of a pack, like maybe kind of like thinking of it as like a super rare pack odd would be 1 in 25.
Expanded super rare roster?
What? Sorry.
An expanded super rare roster?
No, I think it'd be the same. I just think like they would just come up with like prefixed odds of getting that. Like you'd have a chance at it. And then this is something I've thought about for my custom set. If it was somehow released, I don't know if I would want like SEs and LEs to only be like value boxes or factory sets or whatever. I like the thought of having something available in like one form, but then you have like a very low chance of getting it from a pack, but it's still like a possibility. So you don't need to like find it in a specific place or a specific release, like a box or whatever, or like the factory set for the LEs of ROTF. Have it be like pack odds, but you could still make them quite low. So, but then there'd still be that excitement that like if you pulled it, it's like, oh, it's crazy. Like you go crazy when you pull it because it's so rare. I think it'd be like have everything available in packs, but then just adjust the rarities based on what it was like in real life to a degree, but still make things a little bit more reasonable,
accessible as well.
Yeah. Like we wouldn't want the Raptor mod to be as rare,
Yeah.
So.
Something else I've thought of is, the problem with the mail-in things, how you basically couldn't get them out after a certain point.
Yeah.
One idea I had was kind of make it similar in that you need to buy X number of packs, but for each set, there'd be like instead of, mailing in or even emailing in, once you've bought a certain number of packs, you just get that ship.
Yeah.
For, like if you buy maybe 12 or 15 or whatever, or maybe 10, who knows, packs of Fire and Steel, you can get you get Chum Maker or you get Raptor Maw or something like that.
Yeah. And
then after another, you can get the rest.
Yeah. I like that idea too. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Or even another thing is somebody could aim for collecting a full set just so they could like maybe collecting a full complete set of everything else would unlock something even rarer.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, you could have like exclusive new stuff that's like custom stuff that's not part of a set, like an LE, just like an LE, not set, but like a little mini set of stuff that once you complete your set of the first 3, like once you get everything from SM, CC, and RV, then you get like some LE or like a handful of stuff that's new that was never released in the actual sets in the physical form. Yeah.
Or even stuff that was released but was made rare. I guess something like Bloody Throne or Scry the Explorer.
Yep.
For Spanish Main, you get those by maybe by buying 10 packs.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, that's a good one.
And there's a way to apply it to really every set because, there's promo, super rare, mail-in stuff from almost every set.
Yep.
Slay would be an interesting one. Slay, I think, would be a cool one where you could maybe program it as an AI and make it like a seasonal challenge where people get something special if they beat it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to say to just nix it, but that's actually a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, people, maybe they can get themselves a special ship or crew from that, as, that not only would have an interesting ability, but would allow them to say, I was able to beat the OP broken ship.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. Like, you beat it, and then if you beat it, you win, and then you can use it against other people, but maybe only in December or something like that. Yeah.
Or maybe you get a version that's not as broken.
Yeah, that could. Yeah, because it would be pretty crazy.
Yeah. Or just sort of a normal version given out for free to everybody there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although the convention ships, like Baochuan and some others, those would still be possible because something I thought of was you could send a booth to promote this game at a place like PAX, and then you could hand out little code cards for people to punch in a code and get a convention exclusive ship.
Yeah, that'd be definitely pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Either that or just, get early access to a ship that will come out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Nice.
Yeah.
Or complete your factional set of that faction. Like, you could have different ways of getting it, like a convention code, or you could get, like, once you get all the Jade ships in the game, that automatically unlocks the Baochuan, for example.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if you had this idea already, but if you didn't, one idea I had was regarding the SE box chips. Get those by completing a factions roster from one set.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I like that. Yeah.
Of course, you could also simply, because many of those ships weren't all that great, you could give those ships some special attention to make them more interesting, better, for the most part, because a lot of them weren't very good, especially in Davy Jones' Curse.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I think it's an interesting idea. I know the startup cost for apps usually is higher than what people expect, so there'll be. I think a lot of the costs would be upfront, which gets to the problem of getting enough funds raised. I don't know how that would work or how plausible it would be. You'd have to really advertise it and stuff like that. But I think once it got started, I think it would the upkeep wouldn't be as inhibiting. But getting it off the ground would maybe be the bigger problem, if anything. But
yeah, because obviously upfront cost would be the most extreme because you'd have to come up with all the infrastructure for it. You'd have to get your servers, save people's, and you'd also have to do all the modeling, animation, sound work, texturing.
Yeah.
It's certainly not something I'm capable of doing myself, but if a studio were to have the money to start this and the licensing as well, and people who know the game and know how to rebalance it.
Yep. Yeah, that's the type of thing you could probably outsource to miniature trading, honestly. I think, 4 or 5 people going through the sets one by one and redoing stuff, you could come up with a pretty solid balance over time, I think. You could definitely source the community for, like, volunteers to do stuff for free, because I think that would definitely work. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic going forward. If when I post this in the thread, anybody who's listening, you can feel free to respond with your thoughts on a mobile game, like if you'd be willing to try it, what you would want to see in it, what you'd want to see avoided, any pitfalls you see, stuff like that, and your general opinions on it. But other than that, I don't really have much to add for now. This might be something I think we could come back to as well in other podcasts, because it's an evolving thing that we might have more ideas on.
I think you're right about that.
Yeah. Anything else for now or no?
Nothing that I can really think of. It was just sort of a fragmented idea, and obviously, was coming up with more during the podcast. But yeah, we'll probably have more to say about it in the future.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for listening. This was Pirate CSG Podcast, episode number 9. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again in a couple weeks.